Be 91 years old next week. Greet the children every morning when they come in at 8:15. And it's a very, very wonderful feeling. It's just a real neat experience.
I want to say hi to all the little kids that are going to see this. My name is Cecil Thompson. This year I'll be 94 years old. I've been here 5 years, and I was sure glad when they started bringing these young children in so we could be with them. I enjoy them. I get to see them every day. I meet them when they come in. I'm the great-grandfather for 2 great-grandkids, but they live in Chicago. I don't get to see them, but I see these kids here every day.
Well, my name is Betty Long, and I'm a grandma to the kids. I enjoy coming down and reading to them on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And usually on Tuesday and Thursdays, I come down and play with them. And they're just very enthusiastic, very, very loving.
My name is Ed Foster. I've been here at Cumbernauld about 3.5 years. I'm a former teacher in public schools and at Southwestern College in Winfield. And I've had experience from the kindergarten through college, but I've never been more challenged than I have been with the little bikes. They're tough, but are they sweet?
What do you think, Roger? What do you like to do with the kids?
With the kids? Oh, I just like to be around them and interact with them.
Your next question has to do with what it has done and its impact on my own life. I have to tell you that until you're 90 years old, you really don't know how you're going to feel. But I felt several years ago like I had already done anything I could possibly do. I'm almost ready to say that I gave up on an awful lot of my interests, my activities. And I have a little trouble expressing this, but I wake up in the morning so totally different than I did just a year ago. I have a reason for getting up. I have sung all my life, but I've never had the feedback that I get for singing for these kids. Now I see little 4-year-old kids responding in a way that I have never received before.
Ed, do you want to tell the story about what a kid asked you
Oh, yes.
about the war?
You know, I always ask the children, do you have any questions you'd like to ask me? And yes, they do. And sometimes they kind of get off track. But I was kind of taken aback by this question. I said, I was on a battleship in the Navy in World War II, and they said, "Were you killed in the war?" And I said, "I don't think so, I'm here." So there are questions like that, and when they're asking, you never know what they're going to ask, but they're so cute, and they're so serious. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine, for making that work for us. So that is the people that I work with in my classroom on the daily, and it has been so hard to be a part during the pandemic, but we are still heavily involved in every way that we can in being a part of our community there in the classroom and keeping in touch with who we call our grandmas and grandpas, which are all the volunteers who come into our classroom. And so, you know, I've only been teaching that program for 2 years, but my platforms have been heavily influenced by that experience and my experience as an early childhood educator in the decade that I've been doing that. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about those now. And I don't know, do we have a slide with those, Jasmine? There we go. You're so good. Okay, so my first platform is that a quality early childhood education experience should be a part of every child's story. Preschool is a huge part of my story as an educator. I also happen to have loved preschool when I was a child. My parents did pay for me to go to school in a church preschool, and many children don't have access to programs just because of cost, because of location, or because of, you know, parent schedules. One thing that I'd really like to see is universal funding for preschool across our country. We know that children's brains develop most rapidly between the ages of 0 to 5, and by identifying their needs earlier, we can reduce the need for special education and other services later in life, as well as helping develop some of those foundational academic, self-help, and social skills that truly prepare our students for kindergarten and for life thereafter. You know, many families cite the lack of early childhood programming as a barrier to their family's success. So my goal as National Teacher of the Year is to begin and continue work together at the federal, state, and local levels of our government to establish a coordinated system of high quality education and care for 3- and 4-year-olds. I think that we should provide continuous training and quality improvement to all the preschool teachers and programs that we already have, as well as raise teacher salaries and benefits to levels that are similar to those of our comparably qualified K through 12 teachers. My next platform is that social emotional education paired with fostering connections between students and community should be a part of every student's day, pre-K through 12. A lot of people think that teaching social and emotional skills and how to interact with peers is something that really should happen in the early grades, but I think that it needs to be a part of every single grade level. Our brains are not fully formed until we're 24 years old. And so I say that, you know, I was a young teacher who wasn't even 24 years old when I first began. And so that tells me right there that I didn't work on that long enough. So self-regulation, we know, leads to better critical thinking skills, which leads to better problem solving, which leads to mastery of academic content and interpersonal success. And when we connect students to their community, we help them build relationships that will last long after they have left our classrooms and that will provide them with support and opportunities as they grow into adults. When my husband and I discuss this, we always say these community relationships are the armor that kids need to thrive in our community. Teachers should be empowered and supported to receive the training and professional development to focus on social emotional skills in their students, because, you know, we weren't always the number one social emotional educators. The needs of public school, of schools in general, have shifted from what they were when they originally became such a widespread social service. Teachers should continue to connect with their communities and be given the resources necessary to develop those connections. And as you can see from that video, community connections are so powerful for both our students and the community members who are involved. And now, originally, when I was thinking on the topic of platforms, when I was named Kansas Teacher of the Year and then National Teacher of the Year, I didn't know how important elevating teacher voice would be. But through this pandemic, it's definitely risen into my top 3 areas of focus. I am in contact with teachers all over the country, and I'm finding out that some states are really good at elevating their teacher voices, and some states are really missing the beat on a lot of opportunities to do that. Kansas is an incredible opportunity of a place where teacher voices have been elevated and honored and engaged in the plans for our students. But I am disheartened when I hear that my friends across the country are not being given that same value as these ready-made leaders in decisions and in programming and training and anything that affects their classroom day to day. Educators are in the trenches. We're there with our open arms, waiting to accept whoever comes to see us, but we need to have a say in some of the things that affect our profession. So now I think I'm going to turn it over to Libby.
Great, thank you, Tabatha. I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with you. One is, thank you for winning this and really bringing early childhood education into the K-12 world. We've always wanted the respect of K-12 teachers, and I think with your winning this amazing award, it does really elevate our whole field. And then to have you be such a gracious, warm person, but also so smart and makes it even better. So I'm delighted to have this time to talk with you. I want to really just go a little bit further into some of what you're doing and ask some questions. And I think first, we can't ignore the pandemic. It's affected every part of our life. The fact that we can't be together right now and that we're all at home Zooming in. But, you know, school reopening is on the front page of every paper nearly every day. There are task forces going on. Childcare has been open and closed and open throughout. Talk to us a little bit about, you know, these young 3- and 4-year-olds who are going to preschool, either have already started or about to go, and are going in this tough time, you know, entering school in the middle of a pandemic, maybe required to wear a mask, tried to social distance. You know, what's developmentally appropriate and what kind of guidance would you give teachers and parents as we have a new crop of children entering preschool this fall in these conditions?
You know, I was just on a meeting with my district and county's preschool teachers this week, and you know, I was almost moved to tears thinking about the hard work that is ahead of them as people, as educators who are faced with the child's first experience in school, and that being during a pandemic when we can't use some of the social connection and get to know you activities that we previously did, especially with remote learning. You know, how could we still have this powerful connection with students and families when there's physical distance between us? But I really think that the best thing that we can do for our students at this time is to prepare them. And that means, you know, reaching out even before school starts, helping them focus on things like the big feelings we might have when things look different or scary in the classroom or in the world. There are tons of free resources on sites like Conscious Discipline and the TASN website, which that might just be a Kansan thing, but I'm sure that you can get on the website. You know, we have to be able to teach our kids what the expectation is going to be. And they are surprisingly resilient. When I go out in the community, I see tons of small children wearing their mask and keeping them on the entire time that they're in the grocery store. Now, 7 hours a day is a little different than an hour in the grocery store. But I think that we need to remember that kids can learn this. They are willing to do that. We just need to set the good example and prepare them and let them know what the expectation is going to be. But another big reason that we want to prepare them and let them know what our routines will be is because when kids have routine, they know what to expect, and that helps them feel safe, which then leads them to have the ability to learn. When we don't feel safe and our brains are in chaos, there's no way that we can learn these academic skills that we deem so important. So many people look at our young children and they just expect them to know things like how to solve problems or how to wash their hands appropriately or how to keep their mask on because I said so. But these are social skills that have to be taught just as intentionally as we teach reading and writing and math. And our young kids can learn them, and we just have to commit to still building those connections and those social routines in any way that we can.
Great, thank you. So I want to switch a little bit and talk about kids with disabilities. It's pretty exciting to see an inclusive classroom. I just don't see enough of those, and I, like you, have a special ed background.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like children with special needs actually brighten and make a classroom even more exciting. So that was pretty great to see that. Talk to me a little bit, or talk to us a little bit about inclusion of kids with disabilities, and then also kind of as parents and teachers are thinking about bringing children with disabilities back into the classroom, and you know they may need to be there more than any other children. What kind of advice do you have?
Okay. You know, yeah, I've been teaching children with special needs for the last decade, and definitely I agree with you, Libby, that inclusive classrooms are much brighter and happier than I think people even imagine. All the skills that they teach all of the students. I know that all the educators who teach young children with disabilities have been racking their brains to come up with the best way to meet their children's needs. You know, during the shutdown of schools, during the beginning of the pandemic, it was really hard. It was difficult to reach my students who I had trouble getting a response out of in a school setting, and then creating this sort of virtual distance between us. So a lot of what I was doing during that time was parent and family coaching. So my role kind of shifted from being the main educator of the student to coaching their families through what I would do, because I no longer had got to be side by side with their students. So I needed to rely on them a little bit, and they got to rely on me for that too. But I think that we need to remember too, like I said before, that all students can learn. And I see so many people saying, how are our kids with special needs going to keep a mask on? How are we going to get them to stop, you know, picking their nose, stuff like that. But the new health and safety routines should be a priority, especially with our students with developmental delays who might also have other health issues that are underlying. You know, they, through things like social stories and picture schedules and positive reinforcement, can learn these skills just like they're learning any other skills. And working with their families is going to be a huge part of that too. Even if they are in the classroom, providing that consistency and being on the same page with family about what expectations should be for health and safety is a really good place to start. And also you could consider that parent coaching virtually, or even visiting their homes is something some districts are considering. Some of their teachers who are not seeing as many students or not in the higher risk category might be doing some home visiting. So I think we're really shifting to, you know, I can provide some things in the classroom, but I'm also going to have to provide some family support. Now, that being said, remember that our responsibility and our young learners with disabilities is to be least restrictive. So you can't emulate every single thing you do in the classroom, online, or at home, but you can be supportive to what that child's needs are in the setting that they are in during this global pandemic. So we have to temper our expectations a little bit while we get through this, and remember that their safety is always our #1 priority.
So, Tabatha, your classroom is inclusive. Was that because you're a special ed teacher, or did you ask to have that happen, or are all of the classrooms in Kansas inclusive?
All of the pre-K classrooms in my community are inclusive. Now that might not be the case all over Kansas. We are actually pretty unique in our county because we fully fund preschool for every 4-year-old. So any 4-year-old can come to preschool for free. And all of our teachers are special ed certified or working on their certification. And so that was a really big priority for our community so that our classrooms could be inclusive.
Wow. So let's go on to advocacy. Obviously need your voice. I know you're very interested in policy because you've seen what a difference it can make. I can't imagine a better person to be an advocate for children than you. So, you know, what kind of advice do you have to us, how do we elevate the importance of early education within the K-12 system? That would be a great place to start for all of us.
You know, so many preschool teachers are underrepresented in the way of voice. And partly that's because we are newer to the table, right? Because preschool is not fully funded in many places. But I think that we as educators and those who support educators need to focus on what we do best, which is educating our communities about the benefits of early childhood. You know, for example, one big initiative in our community was to work with the local doctor's office and clinics so they could disseminate information to new parents about what we already had available in our town. We have to think about, you know, meeting parents where they're at to give them information, because a lot of families just lack awareness about what we do in our communities, and they don't have access to the same information that some of their other community members might, just because of who they know. I worked with my superintendent this last year on raising awareness about our preschool and early education programs within our own district, because I was finding out that many of my elementary and secondary colleagues didn't even fully understand our early childhood programs. So we worked to make it a part of our opening convocation, and we partnered with our local bargaining association to share the good things going on in every building, so that we could be aware of what was going on in our own school community. And, you know, the other biggest piece of advice I would give to educators is to use the platforms that you have. So social media is a huge one, especially during the pandemic. You know, a lot of social media accounts for preschoolers focus on really cute things like art projects or classroom design, which I love, but they often don't show the meat of what's important. You know, what social skills are happening, what academic learning is happening. And I say share those stories, you know, protect the privacy of your students and the other people in your room, but remember that you have a platform and a responsibility to make early childhood move forward in our country just by sharing your own experience.
Before we move on to the meat of the classroom, because I do think that's an important conversation, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you've done. It's in your bio, and I think it'd be helpful for people to hear how you actually reached out and become a part of the K-12 system through joining the teacher associations. Talk about some of the things that you've done in that regard.
Okay, sure. You know, I realized pretty early on in my career that there were a lot of things happening that people in our district weren't aware of, right? There was some inequity between our buildings. We were an early learning center, so still a part of the public school, but we were all preschool in one building. And so people didn't know what was happening. And so I was always looking for opportunities to say that, what we were doing that was wonderful, but also to advocate for what we needed. And for many years, and I spoke about this at the National Education Association Assembly this summer too, for many years, people were just sort of afraid to speak up, right? Preschool teachers often represent many entities. You know, we represent the co-op, we represent some of the at-risk funding that we get, we represent the district. Our funding, it always seems like it's on the chopping block. And so I think that people are a little bit afraid to speak up because of that, and that there's also this level or this expectation of compliance among people who teach young children, because often we have like soft, friendly voices and really warm, welcoming presences, and we just don't seem like the kind of people who are going to put our foot down about anything. But I like to challenge that perception about what a preschool teacher is, because I think you can be all the things you need to be in your classroom and still be a fierce advocate for your students and your profession. And so that's what I did. I volunteered to be a building representative, and then I sort of worked my way up and became the co-president of our association, and it inserted myself into every conversation that affected the teachers and the students in my building. And most people would say things like, well, we had no idea this was going on. And it was because, one, they hadn't asked us, but two, many of us were afraid to speak up because we didn't want to, you know, cause problems or make waves. But that's sort of what I'm good at, is making waves in the name of social justice and what's right for everybody. So yeah, I've sort of gotten myself involved in any way that I can be in order to help provide a voice for the people in my building.
Right. Well, thank you. So let's talk about the meat of the program, and I want you to talk a little bit about the tension between people who want, you know, reading and writing. These kids are in preschool; they've got to get ready for kindergarten. You know, they've got to be ready for those third grade tests, and we want them doing things that look like learning. And the kinds of things that you're doing in your classroom, which we know are all like really very important learning, but don't like learning to a principal who is, you know, used to kind of looking at 5th and 6th grades. Talk about that tension.
There is so much back and forth about this, not only in the early childhood world, but for the upper grades too. I'm in a really unique position. Again, I work for the co-op in the district, and I'm on the building leadership team, which just went through the MTSS process. But I also have an understanding of what my students' developmental and social needs are. And I will say until the day that I die that learning happens best through play. And I'm not only talking about preschoolers. So this doesn't mean me sitting in my chair watching preschoolers play, right? Which I think is what some people's perception is of the job. But that means me providing materials and experiences that are rich in opportunity for their own creative thinking. It means that my staff and I work really hard on asking open-ended questions that guide their learning and provide experiences. Early childhood educators are often great at this. I still have to do my district curriculum, but I like to put my spin on it, and you can bet that my voice is at the table when it comes to being reflective on that curriculum and offering insight. As a special ed teacher, I love data, but I also know what kids need. So I remember data. People often say data should drive our instruction, and I definitely think that we should look at it to see what our kids' needs are. But we actually have to focus on what the needs are, not what the scores are. And so that's where data can come in handy. I like to look at mostly social data, like where are the problems in my classroom arising the most? Is it during transitions, or is it during circle time? Those sort of things. It can be really beneficial to see what can I change about what I'm doing to help my students learn better. But absolutely, kids need to be playing. They need to be faced with situations where they have to solve problems. Otherwise, they're just going to be rote learning and memorizing, which is something that doesn't stay with us for very long.
So have you ever had a principal or even a parent come in the classroom and just say, I'm concerned that these kids aren't really learning? Mm-hmm. And so, how do you explain to them all the deep learning that actually is going on in your classroom?
I haven't ever had someone complain or confront me about that, but I usually get ahead of it and really explain it like open house. And I'm involved in a early childhood academy team, which trains other teachers on like positive behavior supports and academic supports in our district. And I really like to go ahead and, before they even know me, know what's important to me and my style of teaching. But I would point out during those situations all the things that they are learning, right? So if they're sitting on the carpet building with blocks and I'm sitting near them, I might point out all the standards that we are hitting through that. And then I might especially point out how that child is learning to problem solve and to persist and to approach learning in an excited way.
I love that. Thank you. So this isn't on our script, but I want to hear more about it. I love the model of doing a pre-K program or even a child care program in retirement community, because you could see everybody benefits from that. How could we support more of that? I saw one 20 years ago and was so impressed in Oklahoma. And then I hadn't seen one until I saw your video. So talk to us about how that happened and what we could do to actually promote that.
So we had an early childhood readiness coalition, which I was a part of, with community members and other stakeholders in the district, focused on what the needs of early childhood were in our community. And, that was the brainchild of my superintendent at the time, who had been a huge part of why we have such well-funded early childhood programs in our district, who has since retired. We have a new superintendent who's just as wonderful. But we all attended a leadership training through the Kansas Leadership Center together. And then we got to work on focusing on this adaptive challenge of what the needs in our community were. And so one of the things was the need for more full day pre-K opportunities. And so we just started looking at the resources that we had. And this was a model that we had heard of before. In Coffeyville, Kansas, there is a kindergarten inside of a preschool or inside of a nursing home, which is about an hour and a half away from us. And it's been in existence for 10 years. And they are a little bit different than us, being a kindergarten, and it's not an inclusive classroom. They have to if they have any kids with a developmental delay, it's a really special situation. They have to, bus them to the main school to get services, which was sort of one of the appeals of having a preschool versus a kindergarten. We wouldn't have to do that, and we would be providing something our community didn't have. But what you really needed was was a nursing home that was on board and could support it. The nursing home and retirement village that my superintendent approached, they're a nonprofit, and so they had a little bit of, it was easier for them to make this commitment, I think, because of that and the way that their funding works. You know, he approached them just casually at a chamber coffee, I believe, and by the time he got back to his office, he had a message that said, "We're in, what do we need to do?" And so I get chills when I think about that, how on board everyone was from the beginning. But it was a financial investment for both the district and for the nursing home. So they built the classroom. We provided through grants and district funding, you know, the playground and everything to fill it, but they actually remodeled so that they could build the classroom. But for them, you know, anybody wanting to start something like this, they could reach out to me. We could share that video. You know, that's our kind of our ultimate goal, is to get this to be happening in more communities. And if you talk to anyone who works at the nursing home, it has been nothing but positive. They always have a wait list when their rooms open up, and largely because of the pre-K program that is housed inside.
Great. Well, I'm going to see if we can get one of those in Texas. Maybe.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll be reaching out to you on that regard. So one of the challenges in our field is actually recruiting and then retaining great teachers. And, you know, I want to talk about how to get more people excited about, you know, the kind of learning that you're providing and into the field. And then how can we retain them when they get to be great leaders like you know, they tend to go on and do something different. How can we keep them there? Because we need good teacher leaders in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. You know, one thing that I tell I taught a college class adjunct at Southwestern College here in Winfield last year, and I loved it. You know, it was a small class because it was a private school, but it was so meaningful for me to get to be a part of educating future teachers. And so I would say any chance that educators get an opportunity to do that, and not even teach a class, but to connect, to have observers, you have kind of a responsibility to show the joyous side, right? I think that we get really caught up in our work sometimes, and we forget that part of fostering this community where people want to be is reaching out and inviting them in. So be active with those visitors that come into your classrooms. Be active with the new teachers in your community. It's really isolating being a new teacher, especially if you're going into a building where everyone is A, older than you, B, maybe married with children. They've been doing this a long time. I remember being there, and it was really scary. And what got me through that was those more seasoned teachers who supported me. And at first I was really kind of proud to accept their help. I was like, I can do this. I can do everything. I just graduated. I'm amazing. And really what I needed to do was just to have some grace for myself and allow myself to get help, because I did need it. And once I did that, those relationships started to blossom. But that was such a huge part. We need to create, you know, a culture of not fake positivity, but of genuine support and positivity in our schools. And that starts at the top and it starts at the bottom. So everybody has to be on board with that. But as for teachers, pre-K teachers specifically, get involved. You know, if that looks like joining your teachers union or your bargaining association, do that. Get your voice at the table. A lot of times people are not going to ask who needs representation. That's something that we sort of have to demand. And, you know, don't forget that your experience in pre-K and childcare is valuable. Even if you are in a private school who doesn't bargain, or if you're in a childcare setting, get involved, create committees, talk to your bosses about, you know, things like workplace sort of social committee. That could be even a place to start, improving morale, events and social activities with the people that you work with, but also an opportunity to be reflective. You know, you can present it to your boss like that. A huge piece of being a great practitioner is being able to reflect on what we do and learn from one another. And we need an official way to communicate to make that happen.
That's great. Well, I was at the Department of Education. We had teaching ambassador fellows, and then we had a principal ambassador fellow, and then I actually got funding for a parent ambassador. So we really valued having the teacher voice, the principal voice, and then the parent voice at the table. So we need more of that.
Yes.
People coming to the table and making sure that the voice is heard as we move forward. So Tabatha, I have one last question, which is, what haven't I asked you that you want to make sure that we hear? Because you have an amazing background and just such a delightful way of presenting things. I'd just love to hear anything you think that I haven't asked.
Thank you, Libby. You know, I had a really great time in this conversation today. I'm a conversational person. I'm an extrovert, so I love getting to chat, and it's always fun to do it in this format versus sort of a keynote. I guess I would just say to remember, you know, probably everyone listening to this knows the importance of early childhood education, but I think that we've got to be sort of loud and proud about it, right? We have to create our seat. We have to pull up a chair at the table, because if our ultimate dream is to provide this experience for every child, we have to forge that ourselves, because again, not everybody's going to be asking. But involve educators every way that you can. I have been so enlightened this last year, but it took being named Kansas Teacher of the Year for me to know what was really going on in all the communities in Kansas, and National Teacher of the Year to know more about what was going on around our country, you know, knowing about some of the inequities and the lack of access and things like that. And so I think that information should be more readily available. And I would love to help disseminate that. You know, if anybody on today has a cause that they're super passionate about and something that I could learn more about and share information about using my platforms, I would love to do that too.
So Tabatha, there actually is one more question that came in through the box, and no, it's really at the heart of this. What actually in your own background, maybe even your childhood, prepared you to be such an outstanding educator?
Oh man, it's so hard to talk about yourself in this way, but you know, my home life was a little bit chaotic. You know, my family, they did the best they could, but we moved around a lot. It was emotional chaos. You know, nobody knew how to regulate. And so for me, school was it was a safe place. It was a place that I could have some control, because I could sort of succeed in the way that I wanted to. And I loved every single one of my teachers. But when I got to high school, I was taking this dual credit college Spanish course. And part of that class, we got to go to the preschool in our district and teach Spanish to those kids. And I had always been sort of on the receiving end of education, right? My teachers were always delivering content to me. So this was my first opportunity to not only practice, but also to observe teaching. And what I got to see was this beautiful art form that it is. So that teacher, Pat Walton is her name, who has since retired, I got to watch her move around the classroom and engage with her students in really meaningful ways, and just watch the way that she connected her kids to their learning. That wasn't just, you know, giving them facts, direct instruction. And it was magical to me. And I knew then that teaching was something that I wanted to be a part of.
Tabatha, thank you. You're just such a great representative for our early childhood community. I hope people who are listening and will pass her information on and will reach out and include her in your meetings going forward over the next year, because we couldn't ask for a more gracious, smart, talented, successful representative. So Matt, I'm going to turn it over back to you.
Thank you, Libby, and thanks to Tabatha. I really enjoyed the conversation. I haven't tried this yet, but I was going to give a little clap on the reaction there. So I don't know if our attendees could give you a little emoji round of applause. It'd be great. So we're going to take a short 15-minute break and reconvene at 2 Eastern for our next session, which is entitled Supporting Families and Redefining Engagement. So please, you will go back to the landing page to find the link for that session. And thank you all again. And thanks to Tabatha and Libby. And please send us any questions you have. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.